Before AI, it was cryptocurrency mining. We were using the data centers. We're using the same amount of electricity as a country in Europe. There could brand another energy bar to stand out in a crowded market. Or maybe you've got a new energy drink, supplement, or athleisure brand you want us to pay attention to. How about this one? Nuclear power. With events like 3M Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, it's a heavy task for anyone wanting to change how we think about nuclear energy. Well, Isabelle Boemeke is up for the challenge. And here's the amazing thing, it's working. I was always open-minded to nuclear electricity. Not a zealot, but open. Thanks to Isabelle, I now understand the history of nuclear and how it got such a bad rap. And I have to say, I'm converted. Isabelle, along with her social media alter ego Isod, has found a very modern way to help us understand the truths of nuclear electricity, how it may be the best solution we've got to tackle climate change and offer us a reliable source of electricity to power our AI future. She's a Brazilian model and fashion influencer who understands branding, social media, and her generation. And with her new book, Rad Future, The Untold Story of Nuclear Electricity and How It Will Save the World, Isabelle might just save the world. This is a bit of optimism. This episode is brought to you by True Classic. I wear their T-shirts and have long before they became a sponsor, and it's really cool to see how their company is growing. I'm so curious how a young girl who grows up in Brazil, who, unlike other little girls who dream of being, a princess, that you became obsessed with nuclear electricity, where in a young girl's, upbringing, you discover nuclear plants. Tor, I remember being about 6 years old and just, are you serious? Tor, no, of course not. Tor, okay. All right, my barb nuclear power plant. Tor, actually, what I'm about to tell you is probably boring because I did grow up with Gisele Bündchen as the Brazilian icon Torch, right? And Torch supermodel, sure, she was. Yes, I think she was categorized as an Uber model, which goes beyond it's like a supercar and a hypercar. Totally. There's what makes a supermodel to an Uber model? And what's a tort? I believe the earnings. I believe at the peak of her career, Gisele was making like 42 million a year, and this second top model was making something like 16. It was just that the gap between her and every other supermodel was gigantic. Oh. Okay. So I grew up with Gisele being, she was also from the same state as I am, which is this southernmost state in Brazil. It's very specific because it doesn't feel like Brazil. Now, if I tell you I'm from Brazil, you think of Rio, you think of the beach, the Amazon forest, and this place where I'm from, and where Gisele is from is like Texas. And just like a bunch of farmland and cattle, and just like people grow corn and just agriculture in general. Okay. A lot of German descendants, the good Germans. I always make sure I clarify that. That's true, because there were a lot of Nazis who fled to Brazil. Yes. That's true. My last name is German there, but I made my dad track down the whole genealogy to make sure. I'm like, okay, we're good. It was late 1800s, no problems here. But what's so weird about the place where I was born and lived for a long time is there are people there who still don't speak Portuguese. They full on speak German. Not even German, a dead German dialect. No kidding. Yes. It's really crazy. So during, I think it was Wednesdays, all of these German families would go into the city. Did you speak German as a kid? No. Okay, but these people would go into the town. They would live in little farms around the town, and they would go into the town to get paid, and all of a sudden the town would be taken over by people speaking a dead German dialect. Wow. When Brazil played Germany in the World Cup, they were cheering for Germany. Okay, they're like full-on Brazilians. Anyway, so I did grow up looking up to Gisele, and it wasn't really a dream of mine, but I kind of knew somehow that I was going to end up becoming a model. Okay, don't ask me how. And that did happen. One day I was leaving my high school. I was about 16 years old. And this guy runs towards me and he's holding a microphone in his hand. And there's a guy with a camera behind him. And he goes, are you a model? And puts the microphone in my face. Of course, I wasn't a model. I was a high school student. So I said, no. He said, well, there is a contest here happening tomorrow. You have to go. It's for the biggest modeling agency in Brazil. And I ended up going and ended up placing third in the country. Wow. And that started my modeling journey. So I moved to the United States and began working as a fashion model. And there's a whole entire chapter of my life that happened there until one day I randomly came across a tweet by a planetary scientist called Caroline Porco, where she was talking about molten salt thorium reactors. Their city, molten salt, salt thorium reactors, molten salt thorium reactors. Yes. Okay. I don't know what that is. I didn't know what that was either, but isn't that a cool name? Good name. Sure, great name. Sure, good name for Star Trek. Sure, and I was just curious about it. I was like, wait, what is a molten saltorium reactor, to your point? But also, it was interesting that this female scientist was speaking positively about nuclear. So I did what most people would do in that place. I went on Google and I typed molten saltorium reactor, Chor, and everything that came up was just way beyond my understanding. So I couldn't understand the technology, but it did something to my brain where every time I talked to somebody who was working in energy or concerned about climate change, I would say, have you heard of molten salt or reactors? And they would say, no, but let me tell you about nuclear. And then they would kind of whisper behind closed doors, or like they would just be very weird about it and say, nuclear is way safer than people think. We needed to solve climate change, but people absolutely hate it. And that in itself was also so odd and interesting, because why would it be that a technology that's necessary, that is safe, is hated, right? Yeah. So again, just for many, many years, yeah. I mean, people are afraid of nuclear power. They're afraid of nuclear. Yes. Like, unless you're absolutely schooled in it, which most of us are not. When you hear it, you're just like, and then you remember like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima, and then you're like, I don't know. It seems dangerous, right? You're right. It has a bad brand. It just has. And so to the point where these scientists are like, come here. It's like they're pushing drugs like, come here, nuclear. It's all about nuclear, right? Well, they didn't say it's all about nuclear, but it was almost like they were terrified to even admit that it was a solution to climate change. Sure. Okay. Sure. And I don't know if they were terrified or if they were just hopeless at that point. It's a great technology, but it's never going to happen because people hate it so much. Yeah. So that also stuck with me, like, why? What an interesting thing. Brazil turns out to be a very anti-nuclear country. I didn't know that growing up. I don't have any memories of hearing even people talk about nuclear. So I didn't have that perception myself. But again, just a curiosity. This was back in like 2015, 2016. And then 2019 happens and I see the fires in Australia, in the Amazon, and in California as well. And I was just depressed about the state of the world. Like, you grew up with climate change, right? Do you remember worrying about climate change? As no. I grew up learning about it in school and so on. And I was worried, but it always felt like a future problem. This thing is happening. We're going to figure it out. The adults in the room have gotten it. And I remember when I saw those fires, realizing for the first time that no, we have not made enough progress in solving this problem. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse. I just felt completely hopeless about the state of the world. And as I started looking into solutions for climate change, I came across nuclear again. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let me now dedicate the time to really understand the technology. Sure. And I think everybody who has misconceptions about nuclear or who doesn't know anything about it, when they start reading, they came out the other side feeling like they found Jesus or something. When did show up? So I had, you became sort of like a self-appointed nuclear evangelist, but you did it. Influencer.
Yes, sorry.
Influencer. They used to be evangelists. Now they're influencers. Nuclear influencer. And basically sort of Mech Headroom style, making this sort of, you created a whole persona talking about the benefits and trying to help improve the brand of nuclear, right? So yeah. So I came out the other side thinking, oh my God, okay, everything people think they know about nuclear is completely wrong. When you talk about the accidents, people think millions of people died from nuclear accidents. That's absolutely not true. And then every single thing that people have this misconception about is completely wrong. And so I was faced with that, and I was like, okay, maybe this is the role I can play in helping solve the climate crisis, as absurd as it sounds, is I can translate all of this information that's readily available into something that people want to consume. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, I have this like very odd skill set, which came from modeling, which is like branding and making sure I can sell something, right? Influencing. Influencing. I have somewhat of a social media platform, not but something. Yes. So how can I now get all of this information that's in my brain into young people can relate to and are interested in engaging with right? So I went on a 10-day fast. It's a true story. You didn't know about this? For like a hunger fast? Oh, yes. It was like a hunger protest, not a hunger protest. Troy, why did you do that? Well, this was I didn't know this. Or this was a time when intermittent fasting was the rage, in health. So if taking one morning off is healthy, you figured taking 10 days off is really healthy. Well, I didn't figure there's a lot of research. Okay. There's a lot of research 4, is this one of these like cleanses you do a week of, cayenne pepper and honey and hot water? Sure, no, because it's a full-on fast.
Sure.
Okay. And also that has all sorts of connotations. And I know that you are like me and that you're allergic to woo. So I'm pretty, yeah. By the way, completely unrelated, but I just learned this. I just learned this from survival training. I didn't take it, but I learned this, that we can survive 3 weeks without food. Yeah. Sure, but we can only survive 3 days without water. I didn't know that it was 3 weeks without food, but I did know it was 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water. That is unbelievable. Isn't that insane? By the way, some people probably survive way longer without food, depending on how many horchor. The point is, water is the thing that kills you. So like when people go hiking, more and more hikers die during the day than at night. Dayakers die hikers because dayakers. Hikers don't, no. Because they don't pack enough supplies. Because night you're like, oh, we'll have tons of supplies. So what day hikers do is they put tons of energy bars in their bag. So they got plenty of food, but they don't have plenty of water. They only bring a little bit of water. They're like, oh, we're just going for the day. So it's lack of water that kills people, not lack of food. Anyway, I just thought that I'd throw that out there. A little factoid. Troy, interesting.
Right? Troy wasn't going to die. Toward.
So you weren't going to die because you were drinking plenty of water. You're drinking plenty of water for 10 days.
Sorry. Yeah.
Drinking plenty of water. They give you broth. They give you like broth for electrolytes and all that, because even water alone, can be, you had something.
Oh.
So something, I was doing it just for health reasons. But if you look into the history of fasting, you know that it's been used historically for spiritual reasons, aura cures and protesting, which wasn't the case. It wasn't the case at the time, right? So I come out the other side of it after the 10 days. I'm in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, brushing my teeth, and I look into the mirror. I'm like, what if I become a nuclear energy influencer? Go on. I love this story, which is like the type of idea that you obviously would have after 10 days without food. 10 days without food. So you're in a complete delirium. And that's when you decide, I'm going to invent this idea, invent a character, and become a nuclear electricity influencer. Exactly. So I look, but by the way, I have this idea and I'm doing what you're doing now, which is just like, that's absurd, right? And then the next thing I did was tell my partner that. And he said, that's a great idea, which he also had fasted for 10 days. So I think were both delirious, right? And I just started pitching it to people.
Sorry, you were one of the people I pitched it to.
What did I say? You said you laughed. And then you said that's a really cool idea. So, I mean, I wouldn't have lied to you if you had told me. If I thought it was a crappy idea, I would have been like, no, you should think that. You're extremely honest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you would have said that. I would have told you. You would have told me, but I would get on a flight and somebody sitting next to me would be like, what do you do for a living? And I would say, I'm a nuclear electricity influencer. And the responses were it was never like, oh, cool. It was always something like, what? But what about Chernobyl? And they would have all this. So what is the answer to Chernobyl? Okay. What about Chernobyl? Let's now go through this. First of all, I want to go back up a little sec.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when you started writing your book, you came over there. We worked together a little bit on it, and I learned something from your book that blew my mind, and I find it absolutely fascinating, which is the actual reason why nuclear power has such a bad brand. I know it's so interesting, right? Okay. Yeah. Why does nuclear power have such a bad brand? There are several reasons. But the number one reason, and that's the original sin, what I call, is that nuclear fission was discovered in 1938 in Germany. Full stop. Exactly. There is nowhere. I mean, I guess there are other moments in history, but this was one of the moments in history that discovery just was the worst possible time. Worst place, worst time. So I just need to underscore this. So of course, human beings are working on better sources of energy, more reliable sources of energy, since we figured out electricity and energy, right? And they figure out nuclear fission. They figure out nuclear fission, which is nuclear power in 1938 in Germany. Yes. So of course, this incredibly powerful thing that they discovered, because it's 1938, a year before we go to war. Before Germany goes to war, the immediate reaction is, hey, we can make a weapon out of this thing. Well, the immediate reaction was, hey, this discovery is really exciting. Hitler is probably trying to make a bomb with this. So that is literally what kickstarted the Manhattan Project. Is Einstein a a physicist wrote a letter to President Roosevelt at the time and said, hey, they figured out the Germans have figured out fission. We better get on a path to build a bomb because they're probably trying to do it. The reason the word nuclear has such a bad reputation, such a bad brand, is not because it's dangerous. Because its very first iteration was the Manhattan Project nuclear bombs, and it was built in the time of war. Had it been discovered in 1946, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and the whole world would probably be nuclear powered. Totally. I think that's so torch, and it's also fascinating because since the beginning of the 1900s, scientists were already imagining Nobel energy to provide for the world all the technologies that existed. It would create most technology, the superposition, if you might say, when potential and then the first uses of the technologies, both of were first so it kind of becomes firmly cemented and we have Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that's in the famous mushroom cloud that we see from the Manhattan Project, or anybody who saw the movie Oppenheimer, like that is the human race's introduction to nuclear power. Or nuclear energy in this case. Nuclear, the word experience nuclear power. This is the human introduction to nuclear. And then we spend the rest of the Cold War in a nuclear competition, fearing more nuclear war after we've seen from the nuclear bomb. So anybody who says, hey, what if we took that exact same thing and made safe electricity out of it? The brand is done.
Well, yeah.
And the U.S. government in the early 50s really tried to push for nuclear electricity.
Sure, yeah.
So President Eisenhower gave this famous speech at the UN Assembly General called Atoms for Peace, where he talked about how obviously we had developed this weapons, but it was time to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes only. So that's electricity, that's agriculture. Obviously, like radiation therapy is also another word that's got a bad brand, atomic. Right? Yeah. Even though it's related to atoms, but again, it's the bomb, atom bomb, right? So 3M Island was the first big incident. It wasn't even an accident. It was an incident. It was the biggest nuclear incident in the United States. People say the biggest and the most catastrophic. And when you say that, you probably imagine, oh my God, people died. Lots of people got sick. But in reality, the plant's safety systems, they kicked in and were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. There were some human errors. So people came in and turned off the cooling system that had kicked in. And it caused a partial meltdown of the reactor. They released some radioactive gases into the atmosphere just to relieve the pressure in the reactor, but the release of radiation was not significant at all. So all of the science, all of the studies that have been done have concluded that the release of radiation was so small that it didn't cause let alone a single death, a single cancer case. Wow. So nobody died. Nobody got sick from 3 Mile Island. I didn't know that, But you know why it was the most catastrophic accident in American history, and for nuclear, go on.
Yeah.
Because we turned away from nuclear electricity because of that accident that didn't kill anybody. It freaked everybody out. So we're moving in a nuclear. So the brand was getting better. We're moving in a nuclear, and then 3 Mile freaked everybody out. Well, the brand was getting better in the 50s and in 60s, thanks to folks like Walt Disney and Eisenhower. Yes, exactly. Then the environmental movement in the early 70s starts getting there. They start turning against nuclear mostly because of the connection to weapons, and to military mostly because they saw nuclear as the big man, right? It was kind of like nuclear is so correlated with military, and the Tory government had nothing to do with environmentalism. It had to do more with like left-wing politics, anti-military kind of thing, because again, the brand was so closely associated with torch military usage. Exactly. That they just lumped all the anything nuclear in with that. Okay. Yeah. You got that exactly right. And for the first 15 years after the discovery of nuclear fission, only military could operate nuclear reactors. So it was really connected to military. So yes, this sentiment, to your point, wasn't as much about the environment. It was really more just toward left-wing. We hate the government. It was like this was doing, obviously, like anti-Vietnam War, anti-establishments. So it's anti-Vietnam, anti-military. It's just unfortunately nuclear again. Bad timing nuclear. You're always showing up at the party at the wrong time, the wrong place. And so you screwed it up in 1938 Germany. And now you have your first accident in the 70s. By the way, no, it's post-Vietnam. Though, got people died from radiation poisoning, right? However, in the Chernobyl series, one of the most like chore amazing moments is when these three guys go into the basement. Do you remember this? They go into the basement of the reactor of Tor on a suicide mission. Except two of them were still alive. No kidding. And one of them died in like 2005 from heart problems.
Wow.
Totally unrelated to the accident. The other thing people don't know is there were 4 reactors at Chernobyl. One of them obviously exploded. The 2 other ones ended up closing earlier, but one of them kept operating and making electricity until the year 2000. And this is the one that was right next to the one that exploded. Wow. So again, yes, it was an accident. Yes, it was a tragedy. It's so far removed from what people think it was. Now, you asked about the cancers. It's very hard, obviously, to trace down cause how are you going to You can't, Not everybody who gets cancer came from not everybody who gets cancer, but obviously with radiation exposure, you would imagine that the people who are closer to the accident were exposed to more radiation, right? So you can kind of calculate the most critical, right? Several stories have been from where there were about 16 years ago. They were about 16 cases of thyroid cancer. Thankfully, thyroid cancer has a survival rate of like 99%, right? So these people got surgery and so on. These are bad things, but probably a tragedy. But then you compare to the normal operation of fossil fuels, right? Which is what we use right now for our energy, right? Even when everything goes right in a fossil fuel plant, in the world, we have 4 million people dying every single year from air pollution alone caused by burning fossil fuels, right? And so we would basically need to have 200 Chernobyl. I'm being very conservative here. We would need to have 200 Chernobyl a year for nuclear to be as dangerous as fossil fuels because nuclear is completely clean. The only byproduct, I believe, is steam. So when you drive by a nuclear, impressed that I even knew that. I am very impressed that you knew that. Yes. How did you know that? I don't remember. Did you read my book? I don't remember that from your book. It's one of the useless facts I've picked up along. My mother calls me a walking encyclopedia of useless information. I can relate to some of that, but it's always fun conversations. Yeah, exactly. Good for Trivial Pursuit.
Totally.
Yeah. When you're driving by a nuclear power plant, some of them have the big cooling towers. Not all looks like a smokestack, but it's just steam. Looks like a smokestack, but it's just steam. Yes. It's literally because that's how nuclear power steam, it's running a turbine. Right, exactly. Literally, the heat from the nuclear reactor heats water, which drives steam, which moves a turbine, which makes electricity. There you go. Yes. Good. Yeah. So basically, very old-fashioned. So that's what I was going to say. Basically, all energy production is kind of like that. It's pretty old-fashioned. Yeah. So that's the funny thing about energy production, right? It's whatever is making the thing that makes the turbine go, or that heats the water to make the turbine go. That's what we're debating. Well, how to heat the water. So like with hydropower dams, you have the water the water just moves the turbines. And then with wind, obviously, the wind turns the turbines, right? The turbines. Solar is the only one that's very different. But then with coal, with natural gas, with methane gas and nuclear, it's that you heat up water, you create steam that spins a turbine and creates electricity. But with coal and methane gas, you're literally burning it, right? You're lighting it on fire, and that's the heat that's hitting the water. And with nuclear, you're tapping into the energy inside the nucleus of atoms. And how cool is that? It's very science fiction. So we're going on our little tour of nuclear accidents. Fukushima, right? So Fukushima, so Chernobyl, just to make a conclude on Chernobyl. Yes, it was bad. Not as bad as people think, right? What's also really crazy about Chernobyl is now, obviously, it's like a huge evacuation zone and because people left, a lot of wildlife came back. So it became this really weird accidental exercise on rewilding. It's the only place in the world with 3-headed deer. Kidding. Joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. But really, you just have all these species that have just gone back to their, what was their original, right? Habitat. Okay, so Chernobyl happens. This is it, right? This is like nuclear is done. Too dangerous. It did freak out the world. It did freak out the world with reason. I was a kid when that happened. Yeah. Germany, for example, Germany used to be big into nuclear. Now they're not. They were never huge in terms of the population, but after Chernobyl, they were very much done. And then obviously Fukushima happens, right? So Fukushima was in Japan. Sure, it was a huge earthquake. It was like a 9.0 earthquake. And the earthquake itself is not what caused the accident. Some people think, oh, you can't put a reactor in an earthquake-prone region. And that's not true because they're designed to withstand earthquakes. Sure, just like the buildings in Japan are designed to withstand earthquakes. Sure, some of them.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly.
Sure.
What happened was then the earthquake caused a massive tsunami. And it would also not have been a problem if the seal wall of the Fukushima plant was a little bit higher, but it wasn't. And so the tsunami came in and it inundated the diesel generators in the basement. And so the reactor shut down as it was supposed to, but then it was cut off from electricity from the city. And then the diesel generators that were supposed to be cooling the reactor down were not working because they got flooded. And so you had meltdowns, horseshore, and again, another nuclear accident that just confirmed people's beliefs. However, the Japanese government was much quicker. They immediately obviously admitted that it was happening, evacuated a bunch of people, evacuated 3,000 people, if I'm not, no, way more than that, evacuated thousands of people. And so there were 200 fatalities, but it was all caused due to evacuation. So it's like people who needed medicine, or again, this was in an area that had suffered a major earthquake and a tsunami, and you're evacuating all of these people but from a radiation safety perspective, again, nobody died and nobody got sick from radiation. Okay, so here's this better than I do, Torch, which is the problem with branding, or in this case, misbranding, bad brand, right, is it's emotional. Sure, yes. And even though, the associated with the nuclear bomb was the introduction to the word nuclear atom or atomic, that's how we're introduced to it, which is bombs and wars and mushroom clouds. Then for whatever reasons, we know what the reasons Cold War, reasons the military hold on that technology. We have a couple of accidents, which 2 of them were human error, and there was bad politics in both of them, or there was associated with politics, right, a Cold War, closed communism. And the other one was just, sort of left-wing anti-government sentiment, which fuels this negative brand. And so we fear and then emotion nuclear, right, nuclear power scares, but out of people people the word. And I applaud that you're calling it nuclear electricity. So facts and figures, and we're saying how many would actually happen, how many people died, and what the safety precautions are, and the technology works, and all of these things, and all we can point to are these 3 accidents, since the 70s. Sure, it's all irrelevant. There was no mass hysteria about sharks before the movie Jaws. But good luck getting people to go into the ocean who are afraid of sharks by giving them statistics about the fact that, and here's a real statistics, more people die from dog attacks every single year than have ever been killed by sharks since we started measuring shark attacks, right? So again, facts and figures don't help someone go back into the ocean,
Sure.
Right? So how do we end this? And by the way, I'll even go so far as to say that even though I know you are concerned about climate change, for people who aren't get off of it, because it's a cleaner, more efficient, better form of cheaper energy, right? Is that true? That's right. And that's the thing. I came to it from a climate concern, as you mentioned, torture, right? So lots of people don't believe in climate change. Sure, there's an economic argument to be made here as well. Sure. Not in the United States at the moment. Sure, okay. Sure, yes. So here's the thing, okay? So what happens? Nuclear was economic at one point in the 60s and 70s.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, and then you have changing regulations. You have people turning away. You have utilities who once planned on building. Just to give you an example, when Tuma Island happened in 79. Yeah. Before it happened, there were 120 reactors ordered. After it happened, all of the orders were canceled. No kidding. Not only because of it, nuclear was getting expensive at the time already. But that was kind of the nail on the means the price is high, like flat screen TVs were expensive when they first came out kind of thing. What is that the argument? Well, it's like it's a new technology. It's expensive for the short term. It was kind of the financing mechanisms for nuclear because it's a big upfront investment.
Yeah.
At the time, it was basically impossible to finance this big project, which is what I'm learning, right? Yeah. Which is the demands for power in our world right now are so exponentially high, not just because we don't turn our lights off, which apparently saves very little power. I'm learning. But the demands on AI, AI is, and crypto and all these things, but AI in particular are so power intensive. And we have these massive data centers that need cooling and all of this, of the demands. And so what I'm learning is that their private sector, not the energy company, is building their own nuclear reactors to power their own AI technology because it's the only thing they can find that's efficient enough to provide the electricity, to provide the power to power AI and computing for the future. So like if those people aren't necessarily concerned about the environment at all, but they see nuclear, these are hardcore capitalists who see nuclear as the best solution to power AI.
Oh, yeah.
So as you pointed out, there was a period of time where we were debating whether we'd even grow our energy demand.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds crazy in hindsight, but there was a period of time where like, have we reached peak energy demand?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, as soon as AI came out, we started understanding the amount of electricity that the data centers need. So just to give you an idea, if you ask Tor, by the way, data centers, all those photographs, Tor, that you take on your phone, Tor, that you never look at, the thousands and thousands of pictures that we all take on our pictures on our phones, they go into the cloud, have to be saved somewhere. That somewhere is a data center, George, right? And that's just by the way that was already accounted for, right? But enter AI and you have these huge data centers that are training on huge sets of data and processing all that data and then obviously being used by all the people, including myself. And I think anywhere that you go now, you ask everyone who here uses AI, though everybody will raise their hands. Sure. So we have already adopted this technology. We're not going back. Let's just say that. But if I were to make a Google search without AI and have the same search on an AI app, it would use 10 times more electricity.
Sure, wow.
Sure, yeah. So it's short for now. Sure, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Sure, that ship has sailed. We are increasing our electricity demand. Sure, wow. Now there's an argument that obviously it's going to become more efficient, but we know that we just keep developing technologies that use more. Sure. So maybe it will be 8 times or 6 times, but it's still that's more efficient, but it's still more Tor. And also we don't even know, before AI, it was cryptocurrency mining. Sure. Yeah. So using the data centers, we're using the same amount of electricity as a country in Europe. So hot tip here, top tip for all you Gen Z and Gen Alphas. If you truly care about global warming and climate change and saving the environment, take fewer selfies. So I'm sure that's going to land really well. I don't think that's going to go over well. They're going to be like, Chortra, but the funny thing is, it's true. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's like people telling us to turn off the faucet when we're washing our hands, like turn it on, turn it off when you're washing your hands. So if you take 1 selfie, 2 instead of 87, right, but you got to make sure you look good, But that's the thing. Like if I give my phone to somebody else and be like, can you take my picture, please? It drives me nuts that they hold the shutter button down and I have to go through 56 pictures. They all look exactly the same. Why is this a thing? Anyway, but I digress. I have a solution for climate change. Hear me out. Yeah, exactly. I've got it all figured out. I invited Ryan Bartlett, the founder of our sponsor, True Classic, to sit down for a conversation. We call this an ad with authenticity. The reason the product works so well is because it's what people can't see is that you have a culture that does the exact same thing without the t-shirt. Yeah. The culture is a hard one, as you know, like to build and ramp up over time and to get just to players that are just crushing it and have the right DNA and buy into the system. And it takes a long time to get it great. It's taken us 5 years. Early on, it was just a bunch of ragtag entrepreneurs throwing stuff together, making things work, and then being scrappy. But now, when I interview somebody, I'm usually like the last interview. They've already made it by the time they get to me. By the way, cause I'm not really part of it anymore. I'm like the last guy. They're like, what a team. This is incredibly impressive. And I'm like, listen, it's not me. Like, they're just great in their own right. I'm lucky to have them. They really are fantastic. I sit in these rooms with these executives and I'm just like, who am I? I'm just this broke musician from the Midwest, like sitting amongst these Ivy League killers. Like, how did I end up here? I have a lot of those moments where I feel very like I don't even deserve to be in this room, honestly. Like, these people are so much smarter than me. I'll pay you another compliment. So based on the story of the hiring, right? I know of another company and